Hello and welcome. My name is Chris Betcher, and today I'd like to take you on a walkthrough of Classtools, a new tool from Google that allows for real-time control, student engagement for managed Chromebooks, and it's available to all users of Google Workspace Plus. There are three main components, or three main goals of Classtools. One is to help you better connect with your students. One is to help you engage your students and keep them on task if needed. And the third is to provide options for accessibility needs for students, so making learning more accessible. There are a couple of requirements for making Classtools work in your school environment. One is, as I've said, you do need to be using Google Workspace for Education Plus, or the Teaching and Learning Edition. You do need to be using managed Chromebooks, so Chromebooks that are managed by the school, and all the users are in the school domain, and Chrome needs to be version 137 or above. But if that's all in place, you've got everything you need to use Classtools. There are a couple of administration things that need to be done in the back end by administrators to just set it all in place. I'll cover that in a separate video because it won't concern most people, but we'll talk about that later. All right, let's dig in. Let's have a look at what Classtools can do. You will see two screens in front of you here. The bluey pinky one is the teacher's screen, and the orangey yellow one is the student device. So there are two quite different experiences between the teacher and the student. So let's look at them. If I come over to this teacher device and click this little purple button, which is Classtools, and by the way, that button just automatically appears as soon as the administrator enables this for your school, and it stays there. All right, that is what Classtools looks like for the teacher. And you can see it looks quite different to what most Google tools look like. It's very simple. There's only a couple of options in there, and that's by design. Over on the other page here is the student machine. And if I click the Classtools button on the student machine, you'll see it's quite a different look, very different to what the teacher sees and the student sees. All the student sees is the option to put a join code in, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. All right, so that is what the student sees, and you'll notice that there is no X up in the top corner here of this screen, so very hard to close this accidentally. If a student wants to close the window, they have to come down here, right click on the icon and hit the close button. So very difficult for a student to say, oh, I accidentally closed my work. There's a couple of steps involved, so just be aware of that. Go back to the teacher's device here and let's look at what we need to do here. So there's really a couple of, only a couple of things you need to do. Select which students you want to engage, select what resources you'd like them to engage with, and then push the work out to them. It's as simple as that. So let's look at students first of all. So click on students and we have the option to add students. Now, if your school is a Google Classroom school, it will automatically look through classrooms that you have access to and allow you to pick students from those existing classrooms. So for example, if I go into my demonstration class here, you see I've got 5 students in there that are in that Google Classroom class. I can select only the ones I want. I've only got one student in this demo, so I'll just select one, but you could obviously select as many or all if you wanted to. Let's add that one student. You do also have the option to add other students. So I can say add students and I can pull in students from a different class. So if you wanted to combine students from one class and another, you can do that really easily here by just picking them from different classes. I mentioned that there's a class code, but I'll come back to that in just one moment. So we've got a student in our class. You can obviously put as many as you like. The second thing you add is resources. Now, the goal here in Classtools is you want to give your students something to work on, and you want to focus them on working on it so that that's what they're doing. And as we all know, in classrooms, students often, they can get distracted, they can wander off and do other things on their devices. And Classtools is designed to help alleviate that problem. So just before I open this, I just want to show you something here. If I open my browser, you can see I've actually got a few things open here. My students are learning about elephants. So I've got a few websites here that I've pre-selected that I'd like them to look at. And I've created a Google form for them that I would like them to look through the websites and then answer some questions about what they're learning. So that's what I've got open as a teacher. Now, I show you that because when I go to resources here, I have 3 different ways I can add resources to this Classtools session. One is from classroom assignments. So again, if I've got work in my Google Classroom that I almost want to push to my students, I can go to classroom assignments. It's going to look through my Google Classroom and find any open projects. There's one here on Australian Parliament, so I can choose that one and say add that assignment. And it will add that assignment and all the associated resources into this Classtools session. So that's one way I could do that. So let's just cancel that because that's not the way I'll do it right now. The second way I could do is to go to links, and I could put a link in here. So maybe I want my students to go and read a news article or watch a YouTube video or visit an arts and culture page or go to Google Earth or whatever it is I want my students to go and do. I can put the link to that in here and that will deliver the link to them. So it's a lot better than sort of trying to write it on the board and having them type it in or whatever other way you might get your students to visit a particular website. You can just send them the link directly. So that's another way you can do it. The third way is by going to Open Tabs. And when I choose Open Tabs, it actually looks at my window on my Chrome browser, any windows I've got open, and allows me to select a specific window or specific resources from that window. So let's say I want all of them except for, I actually don't want the YouTube video in this one, so I'll turn that off, right? So I've got a selection of websites here and a quiz, and I'm going to now say, okay, that's what I want. Good, let's add those 5 tabs. And you can see there are the 5 things I want my students to do. Great. Now, before I push this out, I just want to also point out that if I'm asking my students to go and visit a website, I might want them to stay on that website. I may even want them to stay on that specific page on that website. And I have the option to do that here by clicking on the little gear wheel and choosing whether I want to restrict the students to a specific page, the page I've given them, or any page on that website, or maybe I want no restrictions at all. Maybe I want them to wander freely from that link. Okay, so I have that option, and you can see for each of the sites I have that option as well. Okay, so you have the control over what your students are able to visit. Right, let's come out of there. We've assigned our students, we've assigned our resources, and I'm going to come back to Captions in a moment and tell you about those. But there's also the ability to share the screen. Now, I will point out, as you probably realize, mostly in a classroom these days, the teacher's device is often connected to the board at the front of the classroom. And so what you're seeing here on the screen will probably be showing on the big board so students can see what's going on. If your school has a different system, like you're sharing to like a remote projector, like a Chromecast, for example, there is the ability here to put in that display ID to connect to that remote projector. So that option is in there. Okay, so whether you're connected with a cable or connecting remotely, you have the option to do that in here using that share screen button. All right, let's start the session. So we'll click on next, and we can choose how long we want our students to work on this. So let's say we want our students to work on this task for, let's say 20 minutes, right? We'll put a time in there. And we have the option of whether they go into explore mode, where they have free reign over their computer. They can do anything. It's their computer. They can go anywhere, do anything, open anything. Or whether we want them to focus on the specific task at hand. In other words, only work on those resources that I've given them. Okay, let's start in explore mode, and I'll show you how it can be restricted down later. All right, let's start the session, and you'll see we do that, and the session opens up. And over on the student device, you'll notice that it automatically just fired up the Classtools app on their device. And over here, you've got in the top, you can see these are the website links that I asked my students to look at. So very simply, I've pushed a whole bunch of resources to my students, and they've got them there ready to work on. I mentioned a class code before. Like, what happens if a student isn't in Google Classroom? What happens if they've come in late, or for whatever other reason you want another student to join this session? You'll notice on the teacher's device there's a class code link up the top here, and that was another way a student could have joined this session. They could have typed in the class code, and they'd also be in this session as well. All right, so have a look at the student device. You can see there it's a floating window. I can pick it up, I can move it around. Students can work within that, but I haven't restricted their machine because we are in explore mode over here. So if a student wanted to, they could open up another window, they could go to open up Chrome, they could open up another website, they could theoretically open a game or some other distraction that they shouldn't be doing. So one of the things you can do over here is to move your students into focus mode by clicking on the focus button, and you'll see over on the student device it's giving them a little warning that they'll be only able to use Classtools, and there we go. And Classtools has now gone full screen. It's locked out anything else. We don't have a toolbar down the bottom anymore. They can't go anywhere else. This is not a floating window anymore, so they can't move that out of the way. It's like Naplan mode, right? So we've basically locked our students into only the things we want them to be working on. We're helping them to be focused on the task at hand. There might be times when you just want to stop your class and get their attention and let them know something, maybe say something to them, or just pause them momentarily. There's a lock button over here, and I can click that lock button, and you'll see on the student device it puts up a lock. It says the teacher's locked all the devices. All they see there is the time, their Wi-Fi strength, and their battery. So that will stay in place until the teacher comes over here and hits either focus or explore and moves them out of locked mode and back into work mode. Okay, and that's really the core skills of Classtools. It's not very complicated. Pick some students, pick some tasks, send it out to them, and have them work on it. Okay. Now, I did mention there were a couple of other additions. So one of them is, first of all, if you run out of time, we said 20 minutes. You can see there are 17 minutes left here. So if I wanted to add some more time, I have the option to add more time. So let's add another 5 minutes on, and you can see that adds on. Okay. But the other thing you can do in here is to put captions. I mentioned that the teacher's device is very often attached to a projection screen at the front of the room. I can turn on this captions icon here, and I can say show captions on my screen, and that will then put a captions bubble at the bottom of my screen, which is the projection screen. And so now students in my class can be looking up at the big screen and they can see the projections of what I'm saying. They basically get closed captions in my classroom. There's a lot of research to say how helpful closed captions can be for students when they see the words as well as hear the words. So that's quite useful. The other thing you have the option to do is to say allow students to use captions. And if I turn that on, then over on the student device in any moment here, you'll see the captions will also appear on the student device as well. And the students, instead of having to look at the big board, they will actually see it appearing on their own device. Oh, I need to turn it on. Sorry, I need to click that button to show the captions of the teacher's voice, and that will appear now any moment. There you go. So a student has the option to, first of all, the teacher has to enable it, but then the student has the option to turn it on or off to see the teacher's words appearing on their screen. So not just on the big board, but on their actual device. And if a student has, say, hard of hearing or just prefers to have the words for whatever reason, having that ability is super handy inside a classroom. The other layer of this is you might have students in your class that speak a language other than English, and you might want them to be able to get the instructions or the words you're speaking in their native language. And so one of the options here is to turn on this ability to allow students to translate. When I turn that on, you'll notice down here it has the option to translate. Now, I was playing with this a moment ago and I set it to Chinese, but let's just stop translating for a moment. You'll see it comes up with a button that says translation available. And when a student clicks on that, they can then pick from whatever language they like. So let's say your students speak French, for example. So I choose French, and now whatever I say is appearing on the big board in English, but on the student's device in whatever their chosen language is. And you can see from here, there's a whole lot of languages in here. So I could go to, I don't know, let's go to Hindi, for example. Okay, and now that's translating to Hindi. So super helpful for students that need either hearing assistance or translation assistance. It's all built in right here. All right, let's just stop translating that for a moment, and I'm just going to turn all that off, like so. Okay. All right, so that's the captions aspect of Classtools. And then the last thing I want to show you is, let's say my student over here is working on their quizzes. Let's just show the tabs at the top here. Let's say they're on here and they're working through their project, and I can see that they're scrolling down and they're doing things, right? That student's on task. But what if I wanted to check that? What if so here's the quiz, and I want to just check that this student is actually working on their quiz. I have the option as a teacher to go over here, pick the student I want, and you'll see it tells me what tab they're on. If I go back over to the student device and switch tabs, you'll notice that it switches over on the teacher device as well. So now if I had the whole list of students in that list, I can very easily see at a glance which tabs students are on, so I can see if someone is off task. And I can just check to see if someone is on task or if they need any assistance. So here's the quiz. Let's just go over here and click the View Screen button, and that will open up a screen, and it does take a moment to connect. It will give the student a warning, like so, that the teacher will view your screen in 1 second. And there we go. We can now see the student's screen showing on the teacher's device. So the teacher is able to see what's happening at the student end. If a student changes tabs, or if a student's doing something they're not supposed to do, they're playing a game or doing something they shouldn't be doing, you can see that, you can check in on that. But the real advantage, of course, is if a student is doing something and you wanted to draw attention to it, you wanted to maybe share something with the class and say, look at this great work this student is doing, you have the option to share the screen either by clicking on that button and sending it to the remote display like before, or you can just simply enlarge that. And let me just get rid of that. And you can show the student's device on the big board in the front of the classroom really, really easily. So for students who are doing amazing work, you can say, have a look at what this student's done or that student's done, really simply. Let's just stop sharing that screen for now. Let's come back here. Let's open up Classtools again, and let's just click that button to stop viewing the screen, and that screen goes away. So there you have it. That is Classtools in a nutshell. It is not a complicated thing to use. You can see that we've looked at all the different options in here. Pick some students, pick some resources, send them out to the students either in explore mode or focus mode. You have the option of class captions if you need it. You can add more time if you need it. And then when it's done, you have the option to end the session by clicking the end session button. And that will simply just close the session and hand everything back to the student. You can see that Classtools session has ended, and the student now has full control of their device back again. And that, my friends, is Classtools. There is a little bit of setup by the admin, as I mentioned, so if you want to stick around, I'm going to tack a video onto the end of this one for administrators and anyone who needs to understand what the back-end setup is on this. It's pretty simple, but for most people, that's everything you need to know. Thanks for joining me. Oh, hey, so if you're still here, I'm assuming you're an admin. If you're not, you probably won't get much out of this unless you're just curious to see how it works. You're more than welcome to stay. If you're an admin, you need to go into the admin console and log in. And as always, there's a great support document for all of this stuff. So if you just Google Classtools setup, you should find this document, probably the first hit. Otherwise it's in the Google support docs. So look up setup Classtools and you'll see there's a whole bunch of information in here, some requirements. You probably want to read this section here about before you begin, because it talks here about managed networks versus non-managed networks. In a school situation, probably pretty much always want to use managed networks. So do read that because it's useful. But the other stuff is here where you want to step 1, configure Classtools for teachers. And if you scroll down, step 2 is configure Classtools settings for students. You can read through this and it'll show you, but I'll just quickly show you what to do. You need to start in Devices, Chrome Settings. So you can click that link and it'll jump you straight there. So here we are straight into the admin console and in browser settings, user and browser settings. If you just search for Classtools, and it will come up with a whole bunch of hits, and you want this first one here, Classtools. So if you click on that one, it will take you to this page. Hopefully you've got your organizational unit set up so you can clearly differentiate who's a student, who's a teacher. So you can see I've got one in here for staff, one in here for students. If I click on staff, you'll notice that the class settings over on this page are set so that the staff have teacher mode. You can see there's either disable it completely or teacher mode or student mode. Teachers obviously goes teacher mode. A few other settings in here, whether you want to allow it on all networks. For an actual school, I'm not in a school here, but if you're in a school, you probably only want to allow it on managed networks. Read the documentation on that. And I showed you the demo of the live captions and translations and also the ability to view a student's screen. Those settings are in here as to whether you want to allow that or not. You can obviously turn it off. The same with the viewing of the screens. If you are using Chrome M137, you will need to enable Chrome Remote Desktop. Subsequent versions of Chrome, you don't need that. And I hope you're probably on a later version than 137 anyway. And if you want to integrate it with your Google Classroom so you can pull the students straight out of Google Classroom, this is where the setting is right here. So that's what you do for teachers. And then if I just go to students, I won't keep any of those changes I made. If I go to students, you'll see that the students class tool mode is obviously student mode. So you set that for student mode and determine which network you want to use. Again, probably want to use managed networks. And that's really all there is. So just go in there, make sure your staff is set to teacher mode, make sure your students are set to student mode, and pretty much that's all you need to do. Good luck. Hope you work it all out. And if you get stuck, the Classtools setup document there is probably going to help you with all the answers you need. Ciao.